Welcome to American Medicine Today. I'm Kimberly Bonati. We have a jam-packed show. Let's get straight to it. Biotech companies are starting to focus less on discovering major medical cures and more on creating cosmetic products. Why? Because cosmetic products are faster, cheaper, and less risky to bring to market. Joining us to discuss is Dr. Shoshana Shendelman, scientist and entrepreneur of numerous biotech companies. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, can you tell us first off why biotech is focusing more on cosmetics than actual medical cures?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the risk-benefit analysis in different spaces right now. And since the first GLP-1s were approved several years ago for weight loss, it's become clear that that's a major revenue driver. People are willing to pay for that. And there's a clear regulatory path forward with the FDA, which is responsible for approving any drugs in our country. And so those two things together, it's not very risky because you know what to do to get the drug approved. You just follow, the roadmap from the last ones that were approved. And, you can be guaranteed that people will use those drugs and will pay for them. Whereas if we shift to diseases that have no current treatments, it's very risky to develop drugs right now for those diseases because the FDA is a very unpredictable place. And if nothing has yet been approved for a particular disease, you don't have a roadmap to look at. There's a lot of variability. And when it takes hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars to bring a drug through the development process, that risk-benefit analysis is really important.
Do you think any of that also has to do with the fact that the government now is holding these companies liable for any damages to patients that receive their treatment?
I think that's definitely a piece of the equation that's also factoring in. And I think, what you just raised does underscore some of the unpredictability right now that we're facing with development and, then of course, marketing of drugs for diseases.
Yeah. Well, the obesity market is really, kind of a prime example of that. Can you explain what these triple G agonists are?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. So, with GLP-1s, which were the first class of drugs to come through, they just hit one of the Gs. And, the next wave of drugs, the next generation, hit GLP-1, but also glucagon and another target. So they're, at least from what we've seen in clinical studies, they deliver on a greater weight loss than the GLP-1s, which was pretty large to begin with. And the market is very clear. We know who will use them. We know who will pay for them. And there's a lot of profit there for pharmaceutical companies.
Do you think profit is also why the shift is headed more cosmetic?
I think it's a big part of it because you have to remember biotech and pharmaceutical companies are businesses. It's less than 10% of drugs that are developed even make it through phase 3, let alone pass the approval process, which is even lower. And with each of those drugs costing hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to develop, the drugs that actually get approved and marketed and are sold to people have to pay not only for their own development, but for all of those drugs in the pipeline that never made it through. And so it does cost a lot to develop drugs. I think that there are a lot of things we can do, though, as a country to cut that down so that it costs less to develop. And then maybe companies are willing to take a little bit more risk, but we can also lower the price of drugs in the process.
I was just going to ask you how we can combat that trend and really incentivize them to start curing disease. So can you elaborate just a little bit more?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's been most concerning in the past year on the biotech side is the lack of visibility and really variability that we're seeing at FDA. John Crowley and Bio put out a statement on this last week that we're really at a tipping point as an industry, and we need more consistency and less risk on the FDA side. Many people don't know this, but right now, the way this works at FDA, is that they can change their mind throughout the development process. So they could tell you at the start, we want you to do A, B, C, and you do those things. And then you come in and they say, we changed our mind. Now we want you to do D, E, F. So right now, the way that FDA works, when you go in and meet with them and ask questions, they give what's called non-binding advice, which means they don't have to stick through it. So I think that if we kept FDA accountable, if their guidance and their recommendations were binding, I think that would take a lot of the risk out of the equation, and people wouldn't be as nervous about politics affecting the FDA.
Is there any money exchanging hands between the people that are researching and developing these pharmaceuticals and the FDA? Is there money to be made maybe in administrative fees?
And
that's why they don't stick to what they say. So you'll need to refile that. Oh, make sure you send your updated check along with that.
It's a very good point. Companies do pay what's called user fees to the FDA, and you pay them all along the way through development. And then, of course, when you're submitting your drug for approval. So that is true. It's not a huge amount of money, but there's nothing there to incentivize them to sort of be there with the company and care what happens. It's easy enough for, government agencies, bureaucracy to just keep sending you back and forth. They don't feel the pain of that. But if there was a consequence for that, or if the government had to field part of the development cost, these hundreds of millions of dollars, they might not be so wasteful about it.
Summarize a little bit more about your work.
So I founded a few different biotech companies along the way, mostly focusing on rare and underserved diseases. My current company is called Cyana Therapeutics. We're developing cancer treatments, and our lead drug is for treatment of solid tumors, things like breast cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer. And that's a place where even though there are a lot of drugs available, there's still a lot of need from patients. There are still, unfortunately, people dying from these diseases. So it's very meaningful to me.
You are on the path to help many. Thank you so much, Dr. Shoshana Shendelman, scientist and entrepreneur of numerous biotech companies. Thank you for sharing your insight here on American Medicine Today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's all the time we have for this segment. Make sure you stay tuned. We'll have more after the break. You are watching American Medicine Today. Revolutionary in his field, Dr. Bonati created, perfected, and patented the Bonati Spine Procedures. Using his genius, Bonati invented the precise tools necessary to minimize surgery, scarring, anesthesia, and recovery. So successful are the Bonati Spine Procedures, they consistently reflect 98.75% patient satisfaction. 80,000 procedures have been performed exclusively at our location. Nearly half our patients have suffered from failed back and neck surgeries at other facilities. Bonati succeeds where others fail.
I got my life back because of Dr. Bonati, and that's the truth. And I didn't think I was gonna.
Bonnie is happily on her road to recovery now, but to understand how she's feeling, you need to hear how the pain affected her life.
We were on the beach with our friends, and she was sitting back here, and I was talking to her all day and had my head turned. And then I said that night, my neck hurts, it's just achy. I kept complaining about it. I thought that's what was happening, and it wasn't really nothing big. And then I went out paddle boarding. I went out on Monday, everything was fine. Did it again on Friday, and I'm like, God, I can't keep up with you girls. What's going on? And what I had done, or forgot to do, was put my fin, the dorsal fin, on my paddleboard, and that's steering, that's everything. And so I was pulling, twisting and pulling, just to go for about an hour and a half to get through the mangroves and get in, back to shore. The next morning, I went for my walk, which I've done for 15 years, walked 3 miles every day, pretty much nonstop. And halfway through, I'm like, oh my God, am I having a heart attack? I just felt this pain go down my arm. And it was bad and kept getting worse. So I just was walking with my arm up like this, thinking, oh God, I'm having a heart attack. I ended up going to a chiropractor first because I figured out it wasn't a heart attack.
Bonnie first tried conservative treatments to relieve her pain, but soon realized they weren't going to be the solution.
And he tried 4 days to adjust me and do all that and everything. And fourth day he goes, I can't help you. You need to go see a orthopedic. And they're like, yeah, they did, you're going to need an MRI, blah, blah, blah. So I did that. And they said, well, we see a little bit of stenosis and this and that. We're going to make you go to physical therapy. He was just kind of blew me off a little bit. I was a little disappointed, He's just go and get physical therapy, it's not a big deal, really. And it's like, really? I'm sitting here dying here. So I got tortured for 6 weeks of physical therapy.
Bonnie then learned about the Bonati Spine Institute from a friend.
And he was telling me, Dr. Bonati, because I had the same exact symptoms as you, and he fixed me with one surgery, and I was playing golf a month later. Filled out the paperwork online. They immediately called me back. And to get a phone call from a doctor on I think it was a Friday, he called me and talked to me probably for a good 40, 45 minutes, explaining everything. He just sees it in a different way, I think, than a regular orthopedic.
The exclusive Bonati Spine procedures are performed incrementally using conscious IV sedation that keeps the patient comfortable while also awake. This technique allowed Bonnie to communicate with Dr. Bonati and to tell him the instant her pain was eliminated, right there on the operating table.
Now, walk your hand up and down. All right. The pain that you had here and here, is that pain gone?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, put it back.
No, I was scared to do this, of course, because, it's your spine. The last thing I wanted to do was have surgery. So my husband was in there. I wanted him to be in there, and I said, I love you. He said, I love you back. I remember that. Just to get it on the table the first day was a struggle, because it was all in here and in my back. Because it was like someone was stabbing me. I had 2 pinched nerves. He got them loose yesterday. He freed them. And I felt it on the table when he did that, because the nerves came back to life. So when it happened, it was like electricity went through my hand.
No pain? No. All right.
Bonnie, like many patients at the Bonati Spine Institute, was surprised by how quickly she felt relief from her debilitating pain.
How are you feeling?
I got my arm back there.
You got your arm back.
I felt better. I know it was fixed. I could tell. My arm wasn't hurting any, wasn't burning anymore. I can walk. And that's all I wanted to do, because that's my therapy set, is walking. And hey, you win. Because, if I can walk, I'm happy.
Bonnie highly recommends the Bonati Spine Institute to anyone suffering with neck or back pain.
I'm glad I found this happened. I think it was meant to be. My husband will be happy. He doesn't have to grocery shop anymore.
To see more stories of recovery just like this, search for the Bonati Spine Institute on YouTube, Rumble, Apple's App Store, Google's Play Store, Roku, and Amazon's Fire TV. That's all the time we have for this episode of American Medicine Today. If you would like to see more, search American Medicine Today and add it to your favorite streaming device. If you have any comments or questions, contact us at the numbers below. Or you can tweet at Dr. Bonati using the hashtag American Medicine Today or hashtag AMT. We would like to hear from you.